I sat in the conference room surrounded by glossy wood-paneled walls, when my daughter Samantha dropped a line that froze my heart. "Mr. Vance, we just lost $300 million in last night's contract meeting." I looked around stunned, and then my usually stone-faced private attorney burst into loud laughter, hiding his mouth behind a stack of files. A wave of frustration and disbelief hit me. Why was the person I trusted the most laughing while my world was falling apart? If you're listening to this story, hit subscribe and tell me where you're tuning in from. I stood there frozen, eyes closed for a moment, trying to swallow the shock rising in my chest. Samantha stood across from me, one hand resting lightly on her folder like she'd just completed some important assignment. Her eyes were cold, with a hint of fake regret. I couldn't understand it. How could my own daughter say something like that to me, her father? The man who spent his entire life building Vance Global Logistics. A mix of helplessness, anger, and heartbreak washed over me. So heavy I almost burst into tears right there in that polished, formal conference room. Sterling, my attorney, the one I trusted, leaned back in his chair, let out a smug laugh, and covered his mouth with that thick file. That laugh didn't comfort me. It only made me feel painfully alone. I looked around. Every face on the board stayed silent, waiting, watching like they were studying what I'd do next. In that moment, I felt stripped of my power, betrayed by my own blood, betrayed by the man who was supposed to protect me. When the meeting finally ended, I walked out into the hallway, the wide space, the cold white lights reflecting off the stone floors. Everything felt empty, isolating. Samantha stepped into the glass elevator without even glancing back at me. Downstairs, a sleek black limousine was already waiting for her. I just stood there, hands shaking. And then, without thinking, I called a taxi home. That feeling of being abandoned, pushed aside from the very legacy I built, swallowed every clear thought I had left. When I returned to the silent house, I walked slowly across the creaking wooden floor, listening to the emptiness. No greeting, no familiar smile, just quiet. I opened Eleanor's suitcase, hoping for something, anything, a letter, a note, a trace of comfort. But all I found was an old tie clip, worn down by time, as if she hadn't touched it in years. A hollow ache filled my chest, a loneliness too deep for words. I sat beside the suitcase, holding the tie clip. Eleanor's scent drifted through my memory. The afternoons she'd straighten my collar, fix the smallest details, tell me stories about how she helped build this company from day one. And now everything felt like it was slipping through my fingers, 300 million gone. My daughter standing against me, and the man I trusted laughing like I'd just told a joke. The anger rose slowly, not loud, not wild, just a cold, steady storm. I knew I couldn't let this go. Not because of the money, but because of pride, because of the legacy Eleanor and I built together. I had to find out what really happened. Whatever went down in that meeting wasn't just an accident. It was a challenge against my authority, my honor, my trust in my own family. I stood up, looking out the window toward the Miami harbor, the massive ships rocking gently on the waves. They reminded me of the way I used to run this company, every contract, every shipment, every battle Eleanor and I fought through. And standing there in the middle of all that loneliness, I realized I had to keep going. No hesitation. What happened today was the spark. The start of a fight to prove that even betrayed and stripped down, I'm still the guardian of my legacy. I turned back to the suitcase, picked up the tie clip, felt the weight of all those memories, and whispered, "Eleanor, I won't let this fall apart. I'll find the truth." The loneliness stayed, but beneath it something stronger began to rise, a quiet, relentless determination. The Miami night stretched on, but inside me, a new journey had already begun. The next morning I walked back into the office with this uneasy mix of tension and curiosity. Those glossy wood-paneled walls, once symbols of pride and power, now felt like prison bars, reminding me of failure and loneliness. I couldn't sit around and wait for things to blow over. Eleanor used to say the truth, no matter how well it's hidden, always finds a way out. I needed to start digging, even if exhaustion and frustration were still clinging to me. Back in Eleanor's old office, I powered up the ancient computer she'd kept since the early days of the company. Every tap on the keyboard brought her back into my mind, her bright eyes lighting up whenever she talked numbers, contracts, long-term vision. I combed through every folder, every file, hoping for a hint, a clue to explain the missing 300 million. And then I saw it, an encrypted email with a strange, simple title, 300M Anomaly. A rush of mixed emotion hit me, hope tangled with fear. I opened the attachment labeled Backup File A. The writing was vague, almost cryptic, but Eleanor had left a note. Something is wrong with that 300 million. I sat down hard, head spinning. Eleanor didn't overlook details. If she sent this, something had been hidden. Something I'd failed to notice. My pulse tightened with a blend of dread and anger. I'd counted on the idea that even without her, I could keep everything steady. But now, everything felt like it was turning against me. Then I remembered Daniel Ortiz, the former head of IT. Loyal, sharp, fired the moment Samantha took control. I decided to find him. Maybe he could help me decode Backup File A. We met in a shabby little cafe, the kind that smelled like burnt coffee and played old music through a crackling speaker. Daniel looked at me with suspicion, and maybe a hint of warmth. He sighed and said, "Mr. Vance, I got fired because I tried accessing data Samantha was guarding. If she catches you doing the same, you're in trouble." A cold ripple ran through me. Daniel started explaining what he'd managed to recover. I listened to every word like I was swallowing fire. He told me only a quarter of the data could be restored. The rest, including information about some subcontractor in Asia, was still locked away. Frustration and confusion flared up. Why was Samantha hiding this? Why didn't she want me to see the full picture? We sat there under the fading afternoon light pouring through the dusty window. Daniel finally said, "You should brace yourself. The missing pieces won't be easy to find. But at least now, we have a place to start." I nodded. The helplessness was still there. But this time it carried a quiet determination. Eleanor had left clues. I wasn't going to ignore them. Just when I started thinking through my next move, my phone rang. Samantha's name lit up the screen. I answered. Her voice was icy. "Arthur, sign the transfer papers. All rights to the proprietary software go to the new subsidiary. I need it done before the end of the day." Anger surged up, but I kept my voice steady. "I'm not signing anything, Samantha. That software belongs to the company, not your personal game." She said nothing, just a heavy, suffocating silence, then hung up. I stared at the phone, feeling the weight of the challenge she'd just thrown at me. Everything was clear now. She was testing me, poking at my limits, but I was done being passive, done being the wounded father. A shift had happened inside me into an investigator, a hunter, a man ready to face whatever truth was hiding in the dark. That night, back in my quiet house, I opened Backup File A again. Daniel had already sent what he'd recovered. I went through every line, every fragment of data, piecing together whatever I could. With each file that opened, the anger rose. But so did hope. Eleanor had left a trail for me. Even without her, she was guiding me toward the truth. I closed my eyes and pictured Samantha walking through the company halls, confident, cold, convinced she held all the power. But she didn't know that in the shadows, Daniel and I were building our own picture, our own plan to pull the truth into the light. The Miami night was silent, broken only by the whisper of ocean wind through the windows. I sat at my desk flipping through data, scribbling notes, studying every detail. The loneliness was still there, but now it lived beside a rising resolve. I was going to uncover the real reason behind that missing 300 million. Eleanor would not be disappointed in me. To protect our legacy, our honor, I would dive straight into the maze of secrets, fraud, and schemes Samantha had woven. I stood and looked out toward the harbor where the lights shimmered on the water like quiet warnings. Every step forward would require caution, but also strength. This wasn't a fight about money anymore. It was about truth, about dignity, about the power Eleanor and I built together. And I knew every clue, every recovered file was bringing me closer to the moment the injustice would be exposed, and someone would pay for what they'd done. Deep down, I felt Eleanor with me through the clues she left through every tiny detail in Backup File A. It comforted me knowing she was still guiding me in her own quiet way. I closed my eyes, exhaled, and whispered to myself, "Tomorrow, everything changes. I start here, and no one is stopping me." The next morning, as the weak sunlight slipped through my office window, I was still there, head spinning with the data Daniel had managed to recover. A quarter of Backup File A wasn't enough to show the whole picture, but what we had, it already exposed part of the scheme Samantha was hiding. I knew this wasn't an internal squabble anymore. If I wanted to take back control and protect the legacy Eleanor left, I had to step into the open, in front of everyone. Then a piece of news hit me like a punch. Samantha appeared on a financial news channel, smiling with polished confidence as she announced her restructuring plan. Her voice was smooth. "We need to adjust our strategy to fit a new generation of leadership. Mistakes from the previous generation have put the company at unnecessary risk." Hearing that made my chest turn to ice. She didn't say my name, but the implication was sharp, cruel, unmistakable. She was painting me as the villain, the reason for every failure. Right then, I knew if I stayed silent, everything I'd uncovered meant nothing. I went to see Dr. Helen Shaw, an old friend and the financial analyst Eleanor trusted more than anyone. Helen listened closely while I explained everything. When she studied the portion of data Daniel restored, something explosive came to light. The 300 million hadn't vanished at all. It had been rerouted, hidden inside an offshore shell company. Rage burned through me, hot and steady. Samantha hadn't just ignored the company's interests, she had manipulated the numbers, engineered a fake loss, and turned it into her own personal gain. That night, back in my empty house, I received an anonymous message. Just one line, cold as steel. "Samantha will change the server passwords at 3 a.m. tomorrow." A chill ran down my spine. It was a trap meant to flag anyone trying to break into the system. Daniel and I looked at each other and instantly understood one wrong move and everything collapsed. But I also knew I couldn't ignore the warning. So instead of taking the bait, I made another move. I wrote an anonymous email to the entire board demanding an emergency meeting. I laid out the suspicions of financial fraud tied to Samantha and recommended freezing her authority until a full investigation was completed. When I hit send, a mix of fear and relief washed through me. This was my first open strike, and every move after this had to be precise. Over the next few days, I focused on gathering evidence. Daniel and I tried contacting the subcontractor in Asia, the one buried in the damaged data. The first call went nowhere. Samantha had gotten to them. They were nervous, evasive, unwilling to talk about the 300 million. But I didn't stop. Eleanor wouldn't have. I thought of the hours she spent checking every contract, every line in every financial report, making sure everything was honest and clean. Remembering her kept me going. One afternoon, while Daniel and I were going over the restored files in a dim office, he suddenly sat up, straight eyes wide. "Arthur, I think we found the key. The missing portion shows Samantha took a personal 10% kickback from the lost funds. This is clear evidence of fraud." My heart slammed against my ribs. Anger, satisfaction, vindication, everything we suspected, confirmed. Outside rain streaked down the window like a quiet reminder of everything I'd cried over these past days. But this time I wasn't sitting in helpless grief. I had proof, I had a plan, and I was ready to face her head on. Every move I made, from contacting the board to tracking down the subcontractor, was calculated, deliberate. Samantha couldn't flip the situation anymore. That night I slept on the long couch in my office, the city light spilling through the window. I thought about the next step the moment I would make everything public, force Samantha to answer for what she'd done, drag every lie into the light. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about justice, about legacy, about the honor Eleanor and I had built over a lifetime. The next morning, Daniel's latest report came in combined with the new data we got from the subcontractor. Everything Samantha tried to hide was now crystal clear. Numbers, emails, audio snippets, all of it lined up perfectly into a complete map of her fraud. I closed my eyes, breathed deep, and felt something shift inside me. I wasn't the passive victim anymore. I called Helen and shared everything. She reviewed it, then said with total certainty, "Arthur, with this evidence, no one can deny what Samantha did. You're standing at the edge of victory." A wave of relief and fierce satisfaction rolled through me. After so many days of pain and isolation, I finally felt the strength of truth on my side. As I looked out the window watching the ships drifting quietly across the waves, I realized Eleanor never left me. She was guiding me through every clue, every file, every step. Now, with evidence in hand and a plan locked in place, I knew the next move would take me straight to the heart of the war, where truth, power, and honor collide, and where Samantha would finally have to face the consequences of her choices. The Miami night was calm, the ocean breeze slipping through the window, but inside me a quiet fire burned steady, determined. I would not let betrayal win. Every clue, every file, every decision brought me closer to the moment when everything would break open. And when that moment came, I'd be ready not just as a father, but as the guardian of the legacy Eleanor and I built with our own hands. That morning, stepping into the boardroom felt like walking into a room where even the air was holding its breath, waiting for something to shatter. Everything Daniel and I had uncovered, numbers, recordings, fragments that once seemed meaningless, now stood like a cold blade I had to lay bare in the light. And yet, no matter how prepared I was, my heart thumped like a quiet, heavy drum in my chest. The board sat in a circle, faces solemn. Dim light glinted off the polished wood, casting a chill over the room. Samantha entered, last eyes sharp as knives, confidence in every step, almost provocative. She sat, arms crossed, gaze fixed on me, silently daring. "So, what are you going to do about me?" I stood, opened my laptop, and started displaying the first piece of evidence. No beating around the bush, no vagueness, just the raw truth. Numbers appeared on the screen, suspicious transactions Daniel had recovered, encrypted emails, and finally the report showing the secret kickbacks Samantha had taken. In that instant, I saw her jaw tighten, her eyes widen, just slightly, but enough to reveal the crack. The room fell silent, as if holding its breath. I went through each step, each line, each piece of evidence. We had restored my voice, calm, but carrying the pain and anger coiled inside me. At the end, I said quietly, but it hit like thunder in the room, Eleanor approved the final authorization the day before she passed. And Samantha was the only one with access to the server that day. A few board members slumped back in their chairs, shocked. One rubbed their temple. Helen, sitting at the far end, looked at Samantha with a mixture of anger and disappointment. Then Samantha unexpectedly stood, voice sharp with rage. "You're trying to take me down with garbage data you fabricated? A man with no executive position dragging us all into your personal vendetta." It hit me like a slap. But in that moment, I saw her losing control. Her tone wavered. Her breath came faster. She wasn't the same confident figure she'd been when she walked in. I didn't answer. Daniel spoke for me, playing the audio we'd recovered from the old security system, slightly fuzzy, but clear enough to hear Samantha discussing her personal cut with the subcontractor. The boardroom went completely silent. Samantha went pale, hands gripping each other until the knuckles turned white. I could see it in her eyes, cornered. And when someone is pushed to the edge, they either confess or try to destroy everything. Samantha chose the latter. Like a sudden storm, she lunged at me, yanking the laptop off the table. Daniel reacted fast, stepping in, but she swatted it to the floor. The crash echoed, making everyone jump. Then she screamed, voice breaking, "You never accept the new generation. You always want to control everything." Eleanor chose me because she believed in me, not you. Eleanor's name pierced the room like a knife. I froze, a sharp ache slicing through me like a wound reopened. Samantha trembled, breathing heavy, while the board watched, bewildered. I knew what I had to do. I stepped forward, picked up the laptop, reconnected it. "You can smash this whole room," I said, voice low, deliberate, but the truth. "You can't." Daniel played the final piece of evidence we had found. A short video, just a few seconds from Eleanor's private data vault, which I thought had been completely disabled. In the video, Samantha enters the vault the night Eleanor died, accessing the system and copying a massive amount of documents to an external drive. It ends with her staring directly into the camera, cold, unflinching. The room exhaled. Helen put her hand over her mouth, stunned. Someone whispered, "I can't believe it." Samantha knew she had lost. She sank back into her chair, face pale. In that moment, I saw it. Her anger had evaporated, replaced by fear. And I didn't feel joy, no satisfaction, just a deep, hollow sadness, as if we had all lost something we could never get back. Finally, the chairman spoke, slow and deliberate, based on the evidence presented. "Samantha, you are suspended from all executive authority until the investigation is complete. Relevant accounts are to be frozen immediately." Samantha bowed, her head hair falling over her face. No one saw her expression, but I saw her shoulders trembling. I stood still, not happy, not satisfied, just the weight of a chapter closing, and another about to begin. As everyone left the room, Helen came to my side, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Arthur, this is just the beginning." I looked at the door that had closed behind Samantha, the door she walked through with pride, leaving behind a heavy silence. And I knew. Helen was right. The battle I thought had ended had only entered its most dangerous phase. After Samantha left the boardroom, the space felt like it had exhaled. I stood there staring at the laptop that had displayed the evidence, a strange mix of emptiness and relief settling over me. Everything had been revealed. But this victory wasn't about power or revenge. It was about the legacy Eleanor and I had built, about the truth I had finally brought into the light. The next day I called Jason, my son. I had doubted him before, but now I knew he was the right choice for CEO. I didn't want to step into power struggles anymore. It was time to pass leadership to someone capable, someone with the heart to protect our family legacy. When Jason arrived at the office, his eyes were wide with a mix of surprise and respect. When I told him I wanted him to take over as CEO, he couldn't hide his emotion. "Dad, I won't let you down." I looked at him and remembered the days Eleanor and I had built the company together, long nights, signing contracts, handling every risk. I knew that without focus and determination, the legacy could be lost. Now, looking at Jason standing there, I felt a sense of peace. A part of that legacy would continue to be protected. As the company settled into stability, I returned to the empty house. Eleanor's old suitcase still sat in the corner. This time I decided to open it. My hand found the old tie clip familiar to the touch. Inside, a small note she had hidden long ago. "I know you'll protect what we built, Arthur. Keep the legacy." Sending my final love. A wave of emotion swept over me. The pain of losing Eleanor was no longer heavy. Instead, there was peace and a quiet faith in myself. That afternoon, I walked down to the Miami harbor where the boat Eleanor and I had once steered together, now rested quietly in the sunset's reflection on the water. I sat on the deck, sipped my coffee, and placed the tie clip on my shirt. The sea breeze reminded me that life goes on, and my role had changed from running the company to protecting its legacy, passing its values to the next generation. Looking out across the water, the city lights began to twinkle, reflecting on the surface. Everything around was silent, but inside me every feeling was clear loneliness. The anger that once surged had turned into peace and resolve. I was no longer a victim of schemes, no longer defeated by betrayal or loss. I was a witness. I had endured every trial and preserved the values Eleanor and I had spent a lifetime building. As night fell, I sat quietly on the deck, letting the sound of the waves and wind remind me of the lessons learned. The truth always exists. A legacy must be protected. Power is not the final measure. Love, loyalty, and care, that's what keeps everything standing. I smiled, feeling the warmth of the tie clip against my chest, as if Eleanor were still beside me, reminding me that even without her, I could remain steadfast, protecting and carrying forward what we had built together. And as the city lights shimmered across the water, I knew this story wasn't entirely over. But I had stepped out of the shadows of betrayal, loneliness, and loss. I was no longer a victim. I was a guardian of the legacy, a father and a man who had proven that no matter the trials, truth and honor always prevail. Thank you for following my story today. If you want to hear more real-life stories full of emotions, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a video.